Well, now you've commented about philosophical problems having to do with reality in the area of metaphysics. Not about cosmology, but about ontology. But there's actually an interesting relationship between the two. We'll get to that later in the course. Now let's turn to questions of knowledge, and in particular epistemology. And I mentioned in class that, epistemology comes from two Greek words, episteme, ology. That is, episteme being one of the Greek words for knowledge, and ology, the theory of, or the study of, the theory of knowledge. So epistemology is the theory of knowledge. And we talked about some of the problems that we have. Notice we have a problem of trying to define a subject matter, philosophy. Similarly, if we're talking about knowledge, how would we define knowledge? What are the components of knowledge? What makes certain beliefs just beliefs and other beliefs knowledge? And that we call the problem the analysis of knowledge, which leads us to a related problem, which is what kinds of things do we know? Does science give us knowledge? Do our senses, the things that we see, give us knowledge? Do other people's testimony, does that give us knowledge? Does our ability to think, does that give us knowledge? Do all of them give us knowledge? And what are the kinds of things they do that we actually know as a result of it? Do we know things about, we talked about the weather in the future. We really don't know what the weather's going to be like from 100 years, and we can't know that. But presumably we can know what the weather's going to be like, at least occasionally, for the next 10 minutes. And the related problem to when we decide what kinds of things we know, do we know scientific facts? Do we know common sense facts? Do we know things about, what your best friend is going to do? Then the question is, because we talked about, each of these kinds of knowledge looks like it has perhaps a different source. That the knowledge comes to you is justified in a certain way. So what are the sources of those knowledge? So those are two of the problems we discussed. But the main problem, the big problem we're going to see in ancient philosophy is something known as the problem of knowledge and skepticism. And it's almost the flip side of metaphysics. Metaphysics will worry about what is the nature of the world. Now, epistemology looks at it from the other perspective. It's just, we don't want to talk about what the nature of the world is, but how would we ever know things about the nature of the world? And mention skepticism is the view that we can't know certain things. Sometimes we use the word I'm skeptical of something. I'm a skeptic, or I have skepticism to mean I doubt certain things. In philosophy, it's a little bit stronger. It's a technical term meaning that you can't know. Skepticism about certain kind of set of facts is that you can't know that set of facts. And you say, look, it sounds nuts. I mean, certain forms of skepticism sound absolutely nuts, and certainly perfectly reasonable. We don't know the weather 100 or 150 years from today. That's not crazy to think that we're skeptical about the weather in the very distant future. But some people take the position that you don't know that there's a table in front of you. And that's the one that people think is crazy. They understand weather, but there's not a table sitting in front of me. I'm not looking at a computer screen. Of course, this is false. What kind of idiotic question? And it sort of raises the question of, are the sources of knowledge reliable? And that's all of a sudden when we start thinking about that one, and now we understand where the question comes from. Do we really know these kinds of things? The idea is, we talked about seeing somebody or seeing something in the distance that we thought looked to us in one way. Maybe it was very attractive, very unattractive. But as we get closer and closer, we find out that we made a mistake. So our senses that we think are pretty sure sometimes don't yield knowledge. And if you want to take a look at something, take a look at this clip of the movie from the movie The Matrix. Here's a scene where it looks like stuff is going on to Keanu Reeves, the main character, Mr. Anderson, as his character is called in the movie. And then as the scene progresses, all of a sudden, strange things start to happen. So it looked like maybe he didn't know the things that we at first thought he knew. And I also raised the question for you in class. Take something like that the Statue of Liberty is still standing. Do we really know that the Statue of Liberty is still standing? And how do we know that? Somebody will say, how do we know that terrorists didn't crash a plane into it 5 minutes ago? And if they did, we don't know it's standing, right? Think about that. Get on the forum and give me an answer to the question.